Hi everyone, and welcome to the Asrock X399 Taichi motherboard. Is this the Threadripper board we've all been waiting for? Can it top all the others? Is the BIOS good enough? Okay, so we do get a nice first look at the board, and I've got it turned to the side so that you can see the lovely Ryzen lettering, because I've obviously only just got my full retail sample of the Ryzen chips had engineering before, and it didn't have all of that on it. Anyway, so first look at the board. First things first, we do have a secondary heatsink that comes down the side. Now the MOSFETs are all at the top of the board, but this secondary heatsink that comes down the side that's connected with the heat pipe is just to help cool matters, because you do only have a small amount of real estate there. So they chuck a massive heatsink with a heat pipe off down the side to help drop the temperatures down. I will talk to you about the performance with that in a bit. You can see that we have 3 M.2 ports, 8 SATA ports down the side. There is an additional 6-pin PCI Express power connector down on this side if you are going to end up running 4 graphics cards, not necessarily quad SLI or quad Fire or anything like that, but you know, just in case you're using it for rendering grunt. You've got a U.2 connector just there. We've got the 8-pin CPU power connector just up there, but there is a secondary 4-pin just over here. And this is the first board that I've seen that hasn't got 2 8-pins on it. But again, we'll cover that when we talk about the board in a little more depth in a bit. 2 USB 2s, which is nice. You've got a USB 3 external connector there and there, or internal for external connector. You've got 2 USB 2s, 2 USB 3s. PCI poster readout. This is actually quite nice because it doesn't stay on all the time. When it is posting, you get the poster codes going through, but then when it hits the operating system side of it, it just goes off and it stops there being big red lights in your rig. It might have annoyed someone, but anyway, so yeah, that goes off, which some people might find really cool. We've also got a power and a reset switch. There is an RGB connector just down here, but you do get a second one up here. Now, fans on it, we will start, because there is one just hidden just in there. You've got another one just up there, and then there are 2 here and here, and then there is another one just down here at the bottom. So it's not bad for fans, but it's not exactly like acres of them either. But whenever I get boards like that, I do just say about PWM splitters. You can get them from the likes of Aquatuning easily on eBay and Amazon and that sort of stuff. And to be honest with you, unless you're running very, very high draw fans and lots of them on a single header, you'll probably never have any issues. So good being able to hang the phone up on my watch. It's a Samsung Frontier, by the way, before you ask. So you've got BIOS clear on the back. You've got plenty of USB 3s. It's another board where the audio has been moved up though. They're all nearly always down the bottom, but on this, in the middle. Anyway, so you've got your wireless connectivity just here, and then you've got a couple of Ethernet ports, USB 3.1 Gen 2 with a C and an A connector. It ticks all of the right boxes that you could want. And the only other thing to really show you is around the back, when you can see the MOSFET controllers hiding back here. But that has meant that they can shove the CPU a little bit higher up near the top, because you've got the MOSFETs and the chokes all kind of hidden around here, and the chokes are just in there. Yeah, so that is our look at the actual board itself. There is some lighting around the heatsink, but it's very kind of faint, and it's not even really worth showing you. If you want a board with lots of lights, this will not be the one for you. So I did go to a lot of effort to try and keep the temperatures down. So this is beyond the normal fan that we would have run on the Noctua cooler. So we took this one off and we added in a pair of the new EK Vada Evos because they've got a 2000 RPM spin speed, and essentially it was just to try something different, see if we could make any difference. So we've got that on push-pull. Yes, this one is only attached on the graphics card, but it doesn't really hang off much at the bottom, so it doesn't really matter. And the little fan is on the top just to try and blow air down on the VRMs in case it was some kind of VRM heat soak. And I did try that both ways round as well, push and pull, just to make sure that there was some active cooling on it. I didn't bother testing with the AIO on this batch of tests, just to because I can get lower temperatures this way, but I think it's probably down to some kind of setting that we might not have access to in the BIOS. In the BIOS though, if you're used to Asrock stuff, it's all very familiar. Now, one thing I will say is it is quite a simple BIOS. But a very positive thing I can say is I've not had any issues with it. With some of the other boards that I've done in the past, they have been quite glitchy. I'm not sure if it shows you the version that I'm on. There we go, L1.14. I found it very easy to work with. Now, it's very easy to work with because, if I'm perfectly honest, there's not a great deal to it. When I did get to the load line calibration, anything below level 1 was just below, so a smidge of V-droop. When I went up to level 1, which should keep it stable, it went just a little bit above. So for argument's sake, I was setting, as you can see here, 1.35 volts for my 3.8 gigahertz overclock, and I was getting 1.36 in Windows. Now, I do need to be very clear about my overclock because it's the CPU, it's not any settings that I'm using or anything. My old engineering sample was better, and I could easily get 4 gigahertz on it with around 1.39, 1.4 volts. With this sample that I have now, which I got direct from AMD, it's not as good. Now, I have checked with overclockers, DeBauer and 8-pack, and they're saying that the bulk of the retail samples are coming in around the 3.8 gigahertz mark anyway. The fact that I can get that at 1.35 is apparently on the better side of them, but if you've got one that does 3.9 or 4 gigahertz or even beyond, then you have found one of the apparently quite rare good ones. So sadly, I've lost the silicon lottery on this one, and believe me, I have tried so many different ways of cooling them and tweaking them. I've put a lot of work in, and I never normally have any issues with overclocking them, or overclocking in general, I should say. And compared to my experience with Ryzen, it's not that I found it more difficult. It's that I'm personally finding it frustrating that I've not got a CPU that can let me get that little bit further. But as I've said, I have tried really hard to try and get more out of it for you. But when we do get to these kind of settings, I am finding that with this board it was slightly warmer, as I have said. So I think it's some kind of voltage somewhere, but it was very, very stable. I was quite impressed with, it doesn't do all the voltage juggling or anything like that. So there's a lot of positive things to be said about what they've done. Heat is just apparently a byte product. Okay, so you've seen that I added all the extra bits and bobs in around to try and help keep temperatures down, and that was basically because I was just trying to see if it was a temperature issue that I was having. I tried several different thermal paste mounts as well, so remounting, cleaning, do you know what I mean? Going through all that process, and I was using the same setup that I had been with the other boards. I then went in and, like I said, I added the extra fans in and stuff, and then I even added the fan onto the VRMs to see if I might have been getting a bit of VRM soak. Now, the VRM soak, I was getting very good temperatures with the VRMs anyway, so I was literally just trying to rule a factor out when it came to that, and it did seem to be around sort of 8 to 10 degrees warmer than I had seen with this cooler on the other two boards. Now, that could and probably is just some subsidiary BIOS setting that we don't necessarily have access to, because there are a lot of things that we just can't see that are just set for us. But I think there's something there putting a little bit more volts in than maybe possibly needed. So I'm not entirely sure what it is, but it does just need kind of saying. So at 1.35 volts, which when in Windows and under load was 1.36, with all the cores, it did feel a bit warm. It wasn't an issue at stock, not at all at stock, and with this, I mean, we were getting some crazy low temperatures. So when we go on to the actual tests, I've obviously only tested 3 boards with the new chip, and they've all been done on the new chip. Now the results, they come out, and when you place them in the graphs, it obviously looks worse than it is. So what I'm going to say is, when you look at the results, look at the numbers, not just the position that they are in the graphs, because all of these results are mentally close together. Now, if I was to go in and redo the test, or I might have got a slightly different one, but really the only way to even try and make these results better would be to near enough restart the system every single time I did a benchmark, because sometimes that can make a couple of points difference. But with this, I mean, they were fairly consistently in this order the whole time. So with Blender, I mean, we do our own custom Blender run now. The forum member Wraith, he designed a 3 million polygon render for us that we can do with this. But as you can see, we're talking about tenths of a second. Sorry, we're talking about a second between them, and it's ridiculously close. Using these kind of graphs with such a small tolerance between the board is, you would never ever notice this stuff in real life. So that was Blender. Cinebench, again, very close. 3D Mark, very close. PC Mark 10, again, this one there was a few more points between them, you know, sort of like the 20 between the top and the bottom, and very similar with HEC. It did do very well with the VRM temperatures. It's only the second board that I've had with the extra heatsink that goes down the side for X399, and if you were to load up your overclock, which if you've got a manual overclock fixed to all of your cores with a manual voltage, you are going to experience some hot temperatures, both on the VRMs and both on the CPU. Because with the stock CPU, what happens, if you load up all of the cores, the voltage will actually probably drop down to about 1.1, and you'll only be getting 3.3 or 3.4 gigahertz. That's just the way the CPUs are designed, and they're designed that way to stop the heat and to stop the temperatures. And all your fans and everything going absolutely crackers, and the power draw, that's why they've done it. So when we come in and go manually, no, I want them to stay at this, or I want this to be what it is when it's at 100%, and putting loads more volts through, which, let's face it, it could be 1.35 volt plus 1.4 volts is what a lot of people are using. You are going to create a lot of heat. And if you do that, then you're going to need a fairly beefy cooling solution. Now, the Noctua does seem very good at the moment, and I know that there are some AIOs coming out with a full bracket on, and there are also quite a few now, when you have a look around, full cover water blocks. Now, I would say if you're going to the kind of effort to spend this much money on a board and a processor, you're looking at 1300 GPP. For the best part. That's before you start buying all the rest of the stuff. If you know that you are going to want to manually overclock, I would say that you probably owe it to yourself to get some decent water cooling as well. You will be able to live with the Noctua, but with the manual overclock, even these get warm. You can actually get to the point, especially with long runs, and Blender can be long runs. You know, some kind of, if you are using it for very multi-threaded stuff and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to overclock it and it's going to get the times down, the longer the multi-threaded run, the more likely you are to actually hit a thermal limit with the cooler, which sounds weird, but what it ends up being is it gradually, slowly warms up over time, and you actually get to a point where the heat sink is warm and you're not getting enough air over it to be able to dissipate that. So there are lots of little, you know, kind of things like that that you do need to keep in mind, which is one of the reasons why I have been saying about dedicated water. Dedicated water could actually mean that you may be able to get away with those few little extra volts that you may need for your overclock and still be able to live with it as well. Now, like I did say, 3.8 gigahertz at 1.35 volts. That is my CPU limitation. It's not the board limitation. I have put a lot of time and effort into trying to get around my CPU, including I do have a water setup here, and I have had it with a proper TR4 block on it with the temperatures right down, and 3.8 is my limit. I don't, you know, there's not a great deal more that I can do about it. But the weird thing I will say is I've now tested this CPU on 3 different boards and hit that limit at the same time, so it is just the CPU. Yeah, I've lost the silicon lottery on this one. Normally I am quite lucky, and I did get some good overclocks with my Ryzen stuff, so it's just an unfortunate one on this. But like I said, I have checked up with overclockers with 8-pack and Bauer, so I know that there are a lot of 3.1s out there, and I've run through my settings and stuff as well, and it's just one of those things. So don't think I'm trying to be harsh on AMD or not. I've put so much work in to try and make this better, because to be honest with you, where other people were getting like 4 and stuff, it was frustrating me. But you need to also remember, I had 4 easily out of my engineering sample, which is now sadly gone. So, because in case you didn't know, I had the engineering sample taken back off me, but they swapped it around with a retail sample. So it is just the CPU. But anyway, so besides the slightly warm thing, which it could be a BIOS issue, if I'm completely honest with you, if it's going to be slightly warm, but as stable as it has been and as easy as it has been to use as well, I would take that. But I would say to Asrock, maybe go in and have a look to see what may be causing that slightly artificial temperature bump, because as I've said, when comparing it directly to the other boards, it is warmer. But if that's the only thing that they have to fix, then they've actually done an amazing job. This is so much better, stable, and easier to use than the X370 Ryzen version of the board. It's unbelievable. You could take the Asrock badge off of it and replace it with another one. I would not have known. It's genuinely really simple and easy to use. So I can't say any more positive things about it, really. I got the 3.8 gigahertz running. I tried loads of different memory types. I tried, you know, I was genuinely trying to trip it up, and it didn't. And the other thing that I want to stress about as well is when I told you about those, the voltages, it went from 1.35 to 1.36. So yeah, it went up a little bit. But once I got the load line calibration, you know, not drooping and going up, that was fine. But what Asrock have done is they're not using the AMD skewed voltage thing, because AMD actually have their own kind of voltages and stuff set in the CPUs, and that's why you can witness sometimes the voltages and stuff going all over the place. Now what that is because of the turbo side of the CPU, when you go manual, sometimes Asus, for example, they don't completely turn all of those voltages things off to let you take complete manual control of the board. Well, thankfully, for the love of bleeping God, Asrock have gone, well, no, if you're going to go in there and set your volts, we're going to let you go in there and set your volts. And that is a very, very positive thing. So you do get manual control over it. I really don't have anything to specifically moan at about it. And the reason why I'm being very clear about all this stuff is, although it didn't top the graphs, it is probably the easiest board I've used yet. So to put that into context, it is easier to overclock and work with than the Zenith, because the Zenith did use the AMD kind of like varying voltage approach where you set it and it would still go above. Now that's Asus doing their told by AMD, but Asrock, they've not done that. They've gone it with it the normal way, which is the way I would actually prefer. So if you were to ask me right now, I'm not really aesthetically, but just based purely on my my experience with using the board and not having to look at it and all that sort of stuff, because it's not that I dislike it, but I think the Zenith does look better. But purely based on the usage, and I'm going to stress with the BIOS that I tested it on, because I don't want them then to go away and ruin it, because we all know that Asrock can have problems with BIOS. So with that BIOS that I've got it on now, this would be my, based on usage, favourite board of the X399 tests that I have done so far. So when you roll that all in together, and as long as Asrock can fix the heat temperature issue thing that I had before, and I don't think it will take a lot for them to sort it out, I would genuinely say, yeah, this is probably my favourite one that I've tested thus far, and that's why, shock and horror, I'm going to give it the OC3D Enthusiast Award. The minor kind of nitpicky stuff, because we do have to kind of, you know, give the nitpicky stuff. The lights and stuff on it are a bit lame, and to be fair, I don't think they probably should have bothered. And that's really about it. I mean, yeah, that's really about it. So, oh, and the kind of the coggy printy thing on it, I think I preferred it when it was kind of a bit more in your face and it was white, and they've gone for a more sedate version of it now, whereas I think with the heatsink colour like around the outside of the board, I think if they'd gone for a more kind of matte black kind of stealth effect, it would have had a bit more of a premium feel to it. But the cogs and stuff all over it's got, I don't know, it's making me think kind of like, I think it in my head, and I could be totally wrong, I think in my head, it just kind of makes it feel a little bit more childlike, and it doesn't feel as grown up as some of the designs with the other boards. But if I was going to have that, or volts that I couldn't control, or with one of the other boards that you will see, the video's been made, we're going through issues with me trying to help them sort BIOS out now. The fact that the BIOS was just a pig to work with, this would still be the one I would choose. I just think I would hide it behind a very tinted glass window and just be happy with the performance rather than trying to have, you know, like the eye candy that I was sat beside it. So, very positive things, and please remember the very positive things that I have said, because I get pulled up about stuff a lot of the time. So this is one of the times when people start moaning at me, you're going to want to post this video in, because this genuinely to use is an absolute cracker compared to some of the other stuff that is on the market at the moment. So please, for the love of God, Asrock, don't ruin it.